Alright, so in order to start working with your endpoints for your model, you first of all have to start up your server. And in order to do that, you have to make sure you're in the same directory on your terminal, right, as the server file. So I'm going to change, let's check ls. And I'm going to change directory to FastAPI implementation. Now, to make sure that I am in the right directory, which I am, and now I need to run my server, start my server. To do that, use this command, uvcon, and then the module name, which for this case is main, and the name of the instance, like the variable where you save the instance, which in this case is app. So I'm going to, and I'm also going to run it in reload mode because I want to point out some key information. Right. Let me stick there. uvcon. Right. So now I see my server has started. What happens if this server wasn't named main? Let's check that out. So if I rename this to maybe food.py, just for the sake of explanation, I'm going to have to change this from main to food. Why? Because food is the name of the module or the app or the Python file that contains the instance of FastAPI which I want to run. So I'm going to run this. I'm going to copy this now, post it in my Postman, and I'm also going to put in the rest of the URL, which makes the complete endpoint, right? Because over here I specified this. Now I'm going to be making use of the same payload as before, right? So when I send this, I get my response. It says 0 negative for someone who is 60,000 years old and the rest of the information. Now you notice that when I was getting information here, I didn't use like a JSON and then do JSON.get like I did for Flask here. Why? Because in FastAPI you can't do it that way. You need to make use of the base model class, right? What base model helps us to do is it doesn't just validate, right? It also passes your data in the right format and it does a lot of other background checks for you. You can read up on that to find out what else base model can help you do, right? So I create this class, this base model class, right? You can name it anything you want, just use this as the name of the class, patient data. And then I stated explicitly that for all this information, for number of times pregnant, I want it to be an integer because someone cannot be pregnant 4.5 times. You cannot be pregnant at a float number of times. Skin fold thickness should be a float. Age should be an integer because there's nothing like 2.5 years old or whatnot. Now, what happens if I pass in a variable like maybe number of times pregnant? If I pass in 6.7, right? I want to print that so that you can see something. I pass in 6.7, but I already stated explicitly that I expect an integer. When I do that, right, it cuts off the remaining parts and returns just the integer for me. So I have my 6 now, right? Another thing to note about how fast API endpoints or fast API on its own operates, right, is this asynchronous. This function is asynchronous because fortunately Unicron is the full meaning of Unicron, or Unicron rather, is an AGI server, and AGI stands for asynchronous server gateway interface, meaning we can make use of asynchronous functions, and that speeds up our processing time because as you're receiving inputs, output is also computing. There's nothing like maybe the function having to wait to receive inputs first. then process that input, finish, then now start giving out output. This is one of the major advantages of using fast API over Flask, the speed due to the asynchronous functions. And another thing is that when you're working with fast API, you do not have to explicitly state or wrap your response payload in this JSON file, because fast API handles that for you. Once you just define the output payload, you send it here and it will return exactly how you need it to be. Another way to test your APIs when you're working with fast API is by, what's the link? I'm just going to copy this from here. Is by making use of the docs, which is a platform that fast API provides for us, rather than, maybe if you don't have Postman. And I'm just going to go over here, do this thing, and slash docs. Now I hit enter. You see this nice interface that Fast API provides. You want to try out your endpoint, you can click on try out, and I did this to make this 5.9, then execute. You see the response body says 0 negative. So yeah, Fast API is actually pretty awesome to work with because it has a lot of functionalities. It just makes writing APIs so simple and so efficient because it handles a lot under the hood for you. Yeah. So you pick, do you prefer to use Flask? Do you prefer to use Fast API?